everyone, my name is Megan and I'm the assistant camp director, and today we're going to be talking about the parts of a tree and how we affect its growth. Trees are living organisms that are alive just like you and me. They eat, breathe, and have a lifespan. Unlike us, trees are considered producers, which main goal in the ecosystem is to produce resources. We, as humans, are considered consumers, and one of our main goals in the ecosystem is to consume the resources of other consumers and producers. Since trees are living organisms, they have structures that help them keep them alive. Just like how we have limbs and organs, trees kind of have the same thing, but in tree version. A tree works in a very complex system, which is a group of interrelated parts through which matter and energy can flow. And within that system, there are 5 parts. The first part is the heartwood. The heartwood forms the central core of the tree. It's made up of dense, dead wood that provides strength for the tree. The next part is the xylem. The xylem brings water and nutrients up from the roots to the leaves. Older xylem cells become part of the heartwood. The next layer of the tree is the cambium. The cambium is a very thin layer of growing tissue. It makes cells that become new xylem, phloem, and cambium. This is going to be one of the most important parts of the tree that we talk about today, because this is what produces the rings of a tree. The rings of a tree, which we'll also talk about later, is how we count how old the tree is and how the outside world affects the tree. The second to last part is called the phloem. It is also called the inner bark. It carries sap, which is sugar and nutrients dissolved in water, from the leaves to the rest of the tree. At certain times of the year, the phloem may transport stored sugars from the roots to the rest of the tree. For example, in the springtime, the sap of sugar maples rise from the roots and is tapped by people to make syrup. Our last part is the bark. The bark protects the tree from injury caused by insects and other animals, by other plants, disease, and by fire. Bark acts just like our skin does. If it gets scraped or gouged, it'll usually heal over time and will probably leave a scar on the tree, just like a cut does, and it leaves a scar on our skin. Bark characteristics may vary from species to species. For example, it may be thick, thin, rough, smooth, stringy, and so on. When we look at cross-sections of trees, there are 4 things that we typically can detect: uneven growth, forest fires, a branch breaking off, and narrow rings. So our first one that we're going to talk about is uneven growth. This is caused when something is leaning up against a tree, causing it to have a difficulty to grow on that side. The tree grew more on one side, which causes the rings to curve up and around the tree. Uneven rings can also detect that a tree was growing on a steep slope. So this one right here we can show has uneven rings. You can see that there's a dimple physically inside the tree. And then on this side we have some really widespread rings, and then on the other side they're very, very narrow. So the tree was actually leaning towards that side of the cookie. The next one we have is forest fire. This is caused when a fire in the area occurs and the tree is physically scarred. We don't have any examples of a forest fire, luckily. We have not had any forest fires here at camp, but I will be putting a photo of what a forest fire would look like on a tree cookie. We kind of have a picture here. It would physically look just like a gash in the tree where it's scarred and it had to grow over. The next one is a branch. When a branch breaks off, it'll die or fall off. Eventually that tree will go around it and the remains of that branch will be covered. So you can see here we had a branch, and you can physically see the end of the branch here. it broke off, but the tree kept growing around it and it healed over, which is kind of cool. And then our last one is narrow rings. Narrow rings are caused by several things like drought, heavy insects, or damage caused by urbanization. For example, if there's a drought, it may lose most of its leaves and not be able to make food for that year. So the root damage caused by construction. So those rings, like we were saying, if they're a really moist year, have wide. If they're really dry, they're small. So in here, we have a couple really wide rings, but we also have some very narrow rings right here. Also shown in here how there's some wide ones and then very narrow ones from their dry season. Also could have been from urbanization because, for example, concrete, you can't really get water through concrete. So if there's a tree right by a parking lot, it kind of has a hard time getting water. The overall health of a forest is much like the overall health of a human. Many factors can affect its health. For example, a forest fire and disease. In the early 1920s, there was a forest fire on the south side of Vashon Island, which actually did affect part of camp's property. In the past 5 years, we've been dealing with some pockets of root rot. What we're going to be seeing now is our most recent spot where we've had to do a little bit of clear cutting. Even though it is sad that we did have to cut some of our trees down, it was for the benefit of our overall 400-acre forest. Here we have a stump from our laminated root rot cut. As you can see, the middle or the heartwood of our tree has been completely rotted out. Laminated root rot will eat the tree from the inside out, causing the heartwood to decompose. Is the structure of a tree. When the root rot eats the heartwood, it causes that tree to be structurally unsound, then possibly falling down later. Thanks for watching our Parts of a Tree and Overall Health video. We hope you learned something new today, and also start thinking about how you affect the overall ecosystem around you. While you're out in your neighborhood, if you go on a walk, just see, how is that tree looking? How is the overall trees in my park going? How can I help the health of the trees around me? Stay healthy and stay safe.